Hello, we are here again in our show, Like a Bundle of Reeds, with Dr. Michael Laitman. Hello, Dr. Laitman. With us in the studio for the first time, and we hope that you will be with us in many more shows, Masha Shovich. She's a political analyst. Well, she analyzes all kinds of things that have to do with politics and current affairs, etc. And with her extensive experience as far as Europe is concerned, as far as Jews are concerned, we hope to really analyze everything that has to do with the essence of Jewish life, the role of Jews, and especially, which is relevant today, the heightening anti-Semitism and why it's happening and the solution to it. Dr. Laitman, in previous shows, we went pretty deep into what it means to be Jewish, where it comes from, what does this concept mean. We talked about Jewish life in Israel as opposed to Jewish life in the diaspora. We've reached, I would say, a pattern that says that the diaspora Jews have a very important role to play today, specifically because of the increasing anti-Semitism, in that where they're kind of ambassadors, disseminators of unity. So we would like to ask, actually to focus on that today. Jewish life today overseas. Let's say that we have a blank board in front of us. How do you build Jewish life in the current context of today's situation?
First of all, nonetheless, we should try to save whatever we can still save. It's not the same community that was there 20, 30 or moreover 50 years ago. Back then, there were truly strong communities where the parents were very much connected to the community and the children, more or less, were also connected. We've gone through several generations still since then of disconnection, truly disconnection from the community. And if nowadays we have a JCC or some other club, actually, and we see it also according to the statistics, how much the average Jew, let's say in the United States, feels some connection to Judaism, or he feels some connection to the Jewish organizations, the community. If once, at least 3 times a year, they would show up at the synagogue for some event, they would come to the nearby JCC. Nowadays, well, somehow it does exist, but it doesn't exist. So we see that assimilation is increasing, and in general there is no interest in Judaism, and there's no interest in Israel, and there's even some hostility towards Israel, since the Jews feel that Israel is as if hurting their status wherever they live, where they are, because they see that the external public, meaning the nation that they're in, where they live, does not respect Israel, and therefore they have a problem. Who should they be loyal to, as if? Either Israel or that place, that country where they are. And out of that, out of the pressure that they feel upon themselves, they prefer also to punish Israel for the way that it behaves, and in general really for existing. So if the nations of the world, the Goyim, punish Israel and the Jews out of the anti-Semitism in them, the Jews punish Israel because they are anti-Israel, because it really disturbs their living wherever they are.
They feel now that Israel has become something that hurts them.
Because it appears negative in the eyes of the public that is around them.
We talked in previous talks, you told me something very interesting about the newspaper Der Spiegel that you have at home.
Yes, I have. Yes, we were speaking about this yesterday. I have the German paper, The Spiegel, from 1967, where they're reporting about the Six-Day War, actually, and the reporting is so positive. You wouldn't believe it. Not so many years have passed, but the Germans talk sie rollen. They talk about the Israeli tanks rolling in with some identifying with it with pride. It's something today you can't even imagine happening. How can there be such a sudden change of attitude? And also with the Jews living abroad, how can we explain it? Maybe really, how much are we really dependent on
Of the public that we're
the
in,
public's opinion,
we totally
the
depend on
nations
it.
of the world opinion?
You lived for many years in Germany, and I lived for many years in the Soviet Union. And we have a clear understanding of how much the public affects us. So God forbid, I'm not blaming the Jews that live in the United States, for example, for gradually changing their opinions. It's necessary for them to change their opinions.
But how can it be such a significant change in
Within
such
20
a
or 30
short
years,
range of
nonetheless,
time?
it did happen. Well,
Why?
it happened because of politics and the work of the mass media, and the ego of all the nations is increasing, and anti-Semitism is on the rise, because Israel are also not performing their duty, their role as they should, and all of these things together, since they're all interconnected, they roll like a snowball.
I have to bring it another time. I ran into an excerpt by Rav Kook, who passed away in 1935.
Yes.
80 years ago or so. And he writes, I can't remember it precisely, but the meaning of what he says is this, more or less. The nations of the world are right in not wanting Jews to be in Israel because the Jews in Israel are not doing their job. I don't remember exactly when he wrote it, but he passed away in 35.
Yes.
By that, they are helping us, he writes, to pinpoint the fact that our purpose of being in Israel is not to be here physically, but to do our spiritual task for which we're here.
So those people are right that say that we shouldn't
should have come here,
arrived
certainly, and we were given the opportunity to come here, but in order for us to do our duty. The whole problem is that we are not doing here what we should be doing. If indeed we would be giving an example to humanity how it should appear in our days, if we were the light for the nations, certainly they would have related us differently. I'm not blaming the nations of the world for hating Israel. I'm saying that actually Israel has to get better and to fulfill their role.
So let's go back for a second to those same Israelis abroad, because it's really a subject that's really interesting for us and our viewers. You said that we need to be a light unto the nations, etc. We spoke about it. How should the Jewish life, we began talking about how the Jewish community has to look there, the Jewish community to be a light unto the nations.
First of all, we need to bring them the new method of education. As much as it may seem that it's for little children and not for grown-ups, solid adults. However, they need to know what is our role in the world, what do we live for, the reason for anti-Semitism, the origin of the people of Israel, the role of the people of Israel, what does it mean to be the light for the nations, what is the true Judaism, the right one, what is the Torah of truth, and towards what are we advancing? Truly, both in the upcoming years, what is the reason for this crisis that we are now entering? The whole world is in that, and there is no way out of it. Whatever they may tell us, we are continuing within the same crisis, and it is deepening more and more. We're just trying to cover it up, just like a patient, that if we don't have a cure for him, then at least for the pain we give him some sort of a drug, a painkiller, but nonetheless he's deteriorating into a terminal state. And this is what our world is like. And here the problem is specifically with us, because we are the masters of the method for the correction of the world, and we have to bring this correction, show it in practice how it is working on us, and in that we have to be the light for the nations and show it to everyone, and we are not doing that, and even we ourselves don't want to acknowledge it. And the people of Israel in the land of Israel is also feasting, celebrating over what? So we have a great work before the whole people of Israel everywhere in the world, both in the land of Israel and overseas. We need to know where we are. And the nations of the world don't have to be accountable to anyone. We are on the crosshairs with respect to all the nations of the world. Anti-Semitism is growing and it will shut us in. And it won't help us to try and change our names and disappear somewhere in the world. It's not going to work. We have to realize that here there is an issue of a very clear providence on behalf of nature. That indeed we inside of us are carrying some spiritual gene that we have to bring out and show the whole world how we should really be living and reach love thy friend as thyself. All of us, truly all of us.
We talked in previous programs about the spiritual gene. We called it reshimo, recollection. I would say it's that kind of latent memory that is in every Jew, because once we were connected in a state of love your neighbor as yourself. Today, you're saying through education we have to renew that state, rekindle it. A question comes up in me because of what we said about the influence of the environment that's kind of forcing itself on me, and we accept its, adopt its values. How can we instill such fundamentally different education among Jews when they are so influenced by the surrounding society?
On the one hand, they are influenced by the surrounding society. On the other hand, they feel the hostility on behalf of the surrounding society.
It causes them to be even
yes, but there is a limit of how much you can hide. Nonetheless, they discover you, they expose you, and nonetheless you cannot run away from it. There is a process here that is determined by nature from above, and as much as we try to run away and disappear and assimilate among the nations of the world, we can't. Up to a certain limit here and there, and then it pops again. So if it doesn't pop in me, it's going to pop in my son, and nonetheless he will again come back to be the Jew. It is impossible to totally run away from it. You can't. And besides, we know that if the Nazi regimes will appear, as we are seeing now, and indeed, following the method that we study, the future of the world is that the Nazi regimes will increase all over the world, unless we're able to block them.
Barasulam Havashlag writes in the writings of the last generation that contrary to what people think, the following regime after the democratic one, in terms of the natural development of humanity, is Nazism and fascism. He writes it explicitly.
This is precisely following the same evolution that humanity is going through. Meaning it's not something that incidentally happened in Germany, etc. Rather, following capitalism comes socialism for a certain period of time, more or less, and then the social regime turns into social Nazism, etc.
But still, I don't understand. I need to ask again. You said yourself, I as a woman, that I lived many years abroad, I know that's the exact attitude of a Jew that lives abroad, that he feels that he's trying to be better than everyone. And many will say to you that they try to give a personal example, to do what you say, to be a light unto the nations. We're always hearing all kinds of stories about rabbis that give an example and give tons of money.
And does somebody actually respect that from the nations of the world?
But isn't that, no, but that's what you're talking about, isn't it? To be a good person.
No, I'm not even thinking about that. That is not called to be the light for the nations. The light for the nations means to show them that we can be together, we can unite. it is possible for people to connect amongst them in such a way that only out of the connection between them they will live. They will be as a single association. Each and every one will include himself with the desires and thoughts of others, that we will be as one man in one heart. The future of the world is that all of us will be interconnected in a tight, integral inner connection. What?
But what's the light in it?
Light?
What in this connection is light?
We will discover it. When we will start connecting, we will discover that inside of this connection comes to us a feeling of a new existence.
So it's not the connection itself.
No, not the connection itself. The connection is just a means to discover the inner force of connection. Just like the wisdom of the masses, so this force of connection yields a certain inner light. And then we feel a different level of human existence, which is already above time. And then we feel as if the life of the next world.
What is different about this connection? Because I see in communities abroad a much greater connection than we have here in Israel. And they're mixed communities. You see Chabadnikim and secular and religious. They come to the same community, to the same school. You'll see people much more connected than here in Israel. The communities abroad are much more connected. So what connection are you talking about? Some different level?
Because nobody is living at the expense of the other. Here, one is living at the expense of the other. And therefore there is hatred between them, mostly between the religious and the secular. There, it's not like that. Their religion is separated from the state, and therefore there's no problem. Each one has to provide himself with whatever he's providing himself, not at the expense of the state and not at the expense of his neighbor. Here we have a problem. Those people are working, they serve in the army, etc., and the others don't, and therefore they have claims towards one another, because each one is claiming that the other one is not living according to the way they should. So there is some agreement around that, some social consensus. That's obvious on the one hand. On the other hand, the connection between them is not a connection. It's not a connection. First of all, if there is connection, then it is through the external pressure, which is not connection. It's not our choice.
Like here with us as well.
Here also, of course. I'm not saying that the situation in Israel is good. No, not in Israel either. However, we need to reach a connection out of the fact that this is the corrected form of the whole world. And we, specifically the Jews, need to give an example for the whole world about that. The form of connection is the future form of humanity. And it is written in our texts what form it should take, that everyone should be equal, that each one should be included in the others, that everyone should be as a single association. As it says in the Torah, as one man in one heart, don't do to your friend what is hated by you, love thy friend as thyself. Gradually, stage following stage, we have to keep in the connections between us all of these conditions. And it's not out of the external pressure, rather out of the fact that we have to reach that in order to specifically show the whole world the future form of humanity.
Yes, because I ran into many writings that say that unity is Israel's salvation, in general. Here, you're saying something that seems deeper to me, because regardless of needing salvation or not, we have to unite.
Yes, of course. Not out of the external pressure, out of our obligation towards creation.
Wow.
That's
a really heavy sentence.
No, but we see that according to our evolution, we are coming to a state where our ego is showing us how much we're separated from one another, and how much by that we're destroying ourselves, destroying planet Earth, and we're reaching a terminal state. And therefore, we have to show, and here specifically is our role, here and now. This is why we also received the permission to come back to the land of Israel, in order to here establish a state which is totally different. Not that it's for the Arabs or against the Arabs or for and against something, rather to show everyone how to live together. This is our goal, to reach the land of Israel in order to here show a society that lives according to spiritual rules of bestowal and love, reciprocal bestowal and love.
How can I, as a person, a Jewish person living in some little city in the States, everything's fine. I have a car, I have a house.
Big one.
A big one. Yes.
With a big car.
Yes, a big car, a very big washing machine, and the kids may be left to go to school. How can I reach in my life, and with what means can I reach this level of obligation that you're speaking about? I'm not obligated to my kids in this manner. You're talking about a level of terrible
But this is what
level
humanity is
of
claiming.
dedication to all of humanity.
We talked about it before, right?
We did.
Humanity is claiming that we are causing bad to the whole world, that all the bad in the world is by the Jews. Do you hear about that ever? Not more than once, right? No, not so what. I'm not talking about so what. You can say so what about everything, even when death comes. So what? So we die. I'm asking, why is it this way? Why is it rooted in nature in such a way? Where does it come from? Don't you think that they may be right? That they're really saying what they feel. They feel that you are preventing from them the joy of life, that you are taking away from them the good life.
But I
This may
didn't do
seem to you,
anything.
but they feel that that's how it is. Imagine to yourself, next to you there's a neighbor. Her name is Mrs. Masha, and that neighbor, and you're certain of it, you have this inner feeling, is constantly causing you bad. You don't know how, but she's constantly poking and doing something behind the door, behind the bed, behind whatever. Somehow she's doing it through the air, through whatever. She's constantly causing you bad. A terrible sensation, isn't it? That's what she feels. Your neighbor from you. They are miserable.
Poor they.
Yes. We don't understand that.
We as Jews, we were educated to
no,
think that
I mean,
they're not
yes,
okay.
because we don't understand, because nobody taught us our role, what it is that we're supposed to do. And therefore, we don't think that we have to be different, we owe something to the world. And therefore, when they come to us with these complaints, we were saying, what do you want out of me? I was also thinking this way. Why are you coming to me? Who am I? Or you know, look, where I was born, who are my friends? Where I finished, I finished school, what did I do? Where here did I cause any bad? What do you want out of me? We know that it's you.
We talked about it, how there are two kinds of Jews. Those who constantly feel guilty. They have this constant guilt trip, and those who feel the opposite. They feel conceited, they feel arrogant, better than everyone.
These are two sides of the same coin.
And both stem from ignorance. Well,
yes.
They just don't know. Unawareness.
So the first stage is to explain to them why this is happening. That is, if we are having a good life, like the lady says, in the US, in some small town, and everything is fine for the time being.
And the big kitchen, yes, we didn't talk about that one.
Yes, everything is good and nice. But nonetheless, we feel that we're not quite like everyone else. So to explain to the Jewish person, wherever he is, why he's not like everyone. And that this why is something that he can't erase.
Right, because that's what they want. They want precisely to delete.
Help. It won't help. And we've seen it throughout our history already. It is impossible. This is something that stays with you. It is a gene that can be erased, and it doesn't mix with anything. It doesn't assimilate. So,
and it just awakened in our viewers that say, what should they do with it?
We have to receive an explanation for this. That's the first stage. What does it mean to be a Jew? And what does it mean, the nations of the world, a goy? And how are we different? And why the nations of the world are right in the way that they relate to us. I would even put the sentence this way. Yes,
Oh, no.
but it's worthwhile to look at it in such a way because it evokes a question in us to know why. Because by that, we will know how to neutralize anti-Semitism. Specifically by that. Not to shut our eyes and not to try and run away from it, rather open up this question. And specifically in the opposite manner. You are right, let's say, but why is it? And then from here onwards, we can start developing the right way towards the truth.
So, we will continue on our next show. From this point, we'll stop right here at this fascinating point. Thank you very much, Dr. Laitman. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhiovic. You're going to be with us in the next show, I really hope. Great.
I also hope so.
Be with us, and we promise to open up this topic that we just started touching. Until then, bye.